Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and this is going to be video 5 in our DP-600 exam preparation course. And in this video, the focus is going to be on getting data into Fabric. Now, this is the first part of the second section in the exam, which is all around preparing and serving data. And it's worth 40 to 45% of the exam. So there's going to be a lot of questions in this. So let's get into it. In the video, we're going to be covering ingesting data using data pipeline, Dataflow, notebooks, copying data, which is basically the same thing, but they've included it twice in the study guide. Choosing an appropriate method for copying data. So not just understanding what the tools available to us, but making decisions about the best method given a particular problem or a particular scenario. And also creating and managing shortcuts. Now you'll notice that these are slightly deviation from the study guide. What I've done is I've had a look at the whole of section 2 and I've changed some of the order of things. Don't worry, we'll be going through all of the skills in the study guide, but we're just going to be going through them in a slightly different order. So these are the 4 that we're going to focus on today. Now I have released a video in the last month, this one here, data pipelines versus Dataflow, shortcuts, notebooks. And this is a more comprehensive video, so I would definitely recommend watching this either before or after this video. So as such, for this video, we won't be starting from zero, more revising what we went through in the last video, updating it a little bit because there have been some changes, revising some of the core concepts and the distinctions between these tools that you need to know for the exam. As ever, there'll be 5 sample questions at the end of this video, and we've got the school community with quite extensive notes and links to further resources if you want to go into a bit more detail about any of the topics that we cover in this lesson. So let's start with a bit of a framing of all the different options that we have available to us when we're talking about ingesting data and getting data into Fabric. So one group of tools is the data ingestion, the ELT or the ETL tools, right? So extract, transform and load. These are going to be copying data from external systems, bringing them into Fabric and saving them in some sort of data store in Fabric. So we've got the data flow, the data pipeline, the notebook, and the event stream. Now the event stream I don't think is actually covered in the DP-600 exam, so we're not going to be talking about that much today. We also have shortcuts, so that's another method that we need to be aware of that we're going to go through in this video, and that involves bringing data in from Amazon S3, ADLS Gen 2, the Dataverse, and also Google Cloud Storage as well. We've also got internal shortcuts, so connecting our different data sets within Fabric, so creating references to other lakehouse tables from a lakehouse, for example. Then at the bottom, we've got a new feature that's in preview at the moment, which is database mirroring. So you can create a mirror of your database within Fabric from either Snowflake, Cosmos DB, or as a SQL at the moment. And again, I don't think this is actually part of the exam study guide currently, so we're not going to be talking about it in this section of the study guide. If you don't want to learn a bit more about database mirroring, I did mention it in that video that I mentioned previously. So in this video, we're just going to be going through the data flow, the data pipeline, the notebook, and shortcuts in a bit more detail because these are the things that you need to study for the exam. Starting with the data flow. So as you know, the data flow comes with about 150 connectors to external systems, and you can bring that data in using Power Query, like that no low-code interface, and you can do data transformation on that data before writing it to one of the Fabric data stores. So when should you use it, and maybe when should you not use it? Well, if you want to use any of those 150 connectors, then it's definitely good to use data flows. It's a no and low code solution, so it's quite maintainable. If you have people who perhaps don't have SQL or Python skills in your organization, this is a good method. And as I mentioned, we can do extract, transform, and loading all in one tool. Now the data flow is one of the tools that we can use to access on-premise data via the on-premise data gateway. And it's also quite useful when you want to ingest more than one data set and maybe combine them in the same data flow. Although if you're following a kind of medallion architecture, maybe that's not what you want to do, but it's just an option that is possible with the data flow. It's also the only tool that we can use to upload raw local files. So maybe you have a CSV file, this file won't ever have to really be updated. You just want to get some data into Fabric. You can do that in the data flow. So maybe when you shouldn't be using this, well, traditionally, they've been struggling with large data sets, but there's been a number of features released to try and speed that up. So recently they released fast copy. So that's one feature that they released to try and speed up data flows. Now the data flow uses the same backend infrastructure that the data pipeline uses in the copy data activity. So the performance between these two should now be a lot more similar. Another aspect with Power Query is it's quite difficult to implement data validation, right? So because all of our logic is being locked up in those Power Query routines, it's difficult to kind of validate those steps as you're going through them. So that's maybe one reason why you might want to go for the ELT routine rather than the ETL, extract, load, transform, rather than extract, transform, load. Now it's also the only tool out of the Dataflow, the data pipeline, and the notebook where you can't pass in external parameters. So it's difficult to build kind of metadata driven architectures with the Dataflow at the moment. Now there is a kind of way around this where you can create another query within your Power Query engine of the data set or the metadata that you might want to use to parameterize a solution. So there is kind of a workaround, but there's no native functionality for passing parameters into a data flow from a data pipeline, for example. Next up, we're going to be talking about ingesting data with a data pipeline. And the data pipeline is primarily an orchestration tool, right? But it can also be used to get data into Fabric using the copy data activity and also some other activities as well you can use for this, but the copy data activity is the main one. Now, one of the main pros of a data pipeline is that it performs well on large data sets. And now, as I mentioned before, the Dataflow now has fast copy, so the performance should be comparable between the two. It has many connections to cloud data sources, especially in Azure, so it's good for using if you've got data in Azure, for example. We need some sort of control flow logic, so maybe looping through different tables, for example. There's a lot of functionality for building metadata driven or parameterized data ingestion methods. So that's something to bear in mind with the data pipeline. And as well as the copy data activity, you can also use it to trigger a wide variety of other actions in Fabric. For example, a stored procedure. And a stored procedure can also be used for ingesting data into Fabric. For example, the copy into statement in t-sql can be used to ingest a CSV file into a data warehouse directly, for example. Now, some of the cons in the data pipeline, well, it can't do the transform piece natively. So there's no real data transformation activities. But what you can do is embed notebooks and data flows into a data pipeline if you want to do that transformation. It has no ability to upload local files, so that's not possible with a data pipeline. And at the moment, you do need to be careful with any sort of cross-workspace data pipeline usage. Now, I did submit an idea on ideas.fabric.microsoft.com, and it is actually going to be planned now, so that's good news. So they've planned this feature. We don't know when it's going to be released yet, but they are working on support for cross-workspace data pipelines. And what we mean by that is maybe you want to bring data in from a data source and you want to write it to a destination that's in a different workspace to the data pipeline. So that currently isn't possible, but they're working on that feature as we speak. Next up, we've got ingesting data with a notebook. And a notebook is just a general purpose coding notebook, which can be used to, well, for a wide variety of things, but one of the things is to bring data into Fabric. Now, we can do this via either connecting to APIs, using something like the requests library in Python or something similar, or by using client Python libraries. So, for example, if you have a third-party SaaS product like HubSpot, a lot of the big ones have Python libraries that you can use to bring data in, as well as a lot of the Azure tooling. So Azure Data Lakes, for example, have a Python client that you can use to bring data in. That's another option with the notebook. So some of the pros here is, again, it's really good for extraction from APIs because, if you know how to code with Python, you can do quite customized logic around things like authentication and pagination, and that becomes really simple in a notebook. If you want to be using any of those client libraries, so anything from Azure is also really good, or HubSpot, as we mentioned previously. Now, it's good for code reuse. So a notebook can be parameterized and then used in lots of different situations. You can also embed data validation and data quality testing into the incoming data. So we've done quite a lot on this channel around data quality and validating incoming data. So that becomes a lot easier in a notebook. And in terms of the performance, well, a few people have been testing the different performance of these different methods, and the notebook always comes out on top, really, in terms of speed and therefore also capacity usage. So if you're really sensitive around the amount of capacity units that you're using, then notebook is going to be the most efficient. And I'll leave a link to a bit of an analysis done on the Lucid BI blog, and it goes through some of the investigation work that they've been doing there. It's a really good blog if you want to learn more about that. Now, some of the cons, well, when you don't have a Python capability in your organization, that might sound a bit of an obvious one. But if you don't have a team to write and then support these ETL notebooks, then it's not going to be a good choice for you. And secondly, one of the limitations with the notebook is you can't actually currently write into a data warehouse. So if that's your destination, then you're going to be wanting to using other tools for data ingestion, not the notebook. Okay, so the other method that we can use to bring data into Fabric, or at least make data accessible from within Fabric, is the shortcut. And we've talked quite a lot about shortcuts on this channel so far. So what we're going to be doing is just a bit of a review of what's possible with a shortcut and some of the things that you need to bear in mind for the exam. So the first thing is kind of a bit of an overview, really. A shortcut enables you to create a live link to data stored in another part of Fabric, which is an internal shortcut, or in the following external storage locations. So ADLS Gen 2, Azure Data Lake Storage, Amazon S3, other services that use Amazon S3 for storage. For example, Cloudflare buckets also use Amazon S3, and that's quite a big section of the market. There's a lot of tools that use Amazon S3 for their storage, and that is now opened up for shortcuts. Google Cloud Storage is another one, and also tables in the Dataverse. Now, a shortcut can be set up for individual files, but also for a folder. So if you set up a shortcut to a folder, it's basically going to bring in all of the files that are in that folder and sync them. Now, one thing to be careful of is the cross-region egress fees. So if your Fabric capacity is in UK South region, for example, but your ADLS storage account is in West US, then you're going to be charged cross-region egress fees by Azure, basically. And that's 1 cent per gigabyte of data that's transferred. Now, you can also create shortcuts now via the Fabric REST API as well. So if you want to do some sort of programmatic creation of shortcuts, maybe you want to do hundreds of tables shortcutting in one go, then that's an option for you there. Now, something that might come up in the exam is around permissions for shortcuts. So what I've done is I've just copied the documentation piece here, and I'll link to this in the school community, as always. So what this table is showing is the shortcut related permissions for each workspace role. So starting at the top there, we've got creating a shortcut. Well, to be able to create a shortcut, the user needs write permission in the place that they're creating the shortcut, and also read permission of the file or the thing that they're shortcutting to. Okay, so these are the two permissions that you need side by side to create a new shortcut. Secondly, if you just want to read the file contents of a shortcut, well, you're going to need read permissions in both the place where the shortcut lives, but also where the reference file is living as well. So you need at least read permission in both of these locations. If you want to write new files or new data to a shortcut target location, you're going to need write permissions for both of those locations, both where you're writing the shortcut data to and where that shortcut data is being read into as well. So let's just talk now about deciding when to use which method, and we did touch on this in the first lesson in this series. We talked about some of the deciding factors when we're planning out our Fabric implementation, right? So talking about the storage, where is it stored, and also what skills exist in the team. And that's a really good start, but there's also some other factors that we need to bear in mind when we're thinking about choosing a data ingestion method. So if you have a requirement for real-time or near real-time data, you're going to be wanting to prefer the options like the shortcut, if it's a file or folders, or database mirroring if it's in a table in any of the 3 database types that are supported by database mirroring, because these are live links to those locations. So when you query it, it's going to have near real-time data coming back. We talked about the skills in the team. So if you've got predominantly no and low code users, then the data flow and the data pipeline. If you've got predominantly SQL based, then you can use the data pipeline and the stored procedure activity or script activity, and we'll look at some of that in the next lesson. We'll be talking more about stored procedures and that kind of thing. But it is possible to use, for example, the copy into statement for ingesting data from files like Parquet files or from CSV files into a data warehouse. And if you've got Python or Scala skills, then you can be using notebooks. The next thing is around cross-workspace limitations. As we mentioned before, the data pipeline must be in the same workspace as your destination store when we're talking about data ingestion, right? So it needs to be in the same workspace. And the other 2 methods, the data flow and the Notebook, they don't have those limitations, just to be clear on that. Next, talk about the scalability and the size of your data and cost and capacity usage, and all these things are pretty tightly linked, right? So in general, the Notebook, from quite a few people's analyses that I've seen, is the most efficient method. I'm not sure if you'll be tested on this in the exam, but just something to bear in mind for when you're actually designing solutions. Okay, so now let's test some of our knowledge in this part of the exam when we're talking about getting data into Fabric. Question 1. You're trying to create a shortcut to a folder of CSV files in Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. Which of the following is a valid connection string you can connect to? A, B, C, or D? Now I'll pause the video here, have a bit of a think, and I'll reveal the answer to you shortly. So the answer here is D. So in Azure, there's a number of different endpoints that we can connect to it for a storage account. And the one that we need for a shortcut is the DFS, the distributed file system path, which is D, the database.windows.net. Well, it's not a database, so it's not going to be A. And B and C are both endpoints of a storage account, but it's not the ones that you need to create a shortcut. Question 2, you're implementing the first stage in a medallion architecture. Your goal is to retrieve data from a REST API using a GET request. And you're going to save the raw JSON response in the files area of a bronze lakehouse. Which of the following methods can you use to achieve this? Now there's 3 correct answers here. Is it A, the data pipeline copy data activity, B, the data flow with the web API connector, C, the event stream, B, the data pipeline web activity, or E, the Fabric notebook? So there's 3 methods here. A, the data pipeline copy data activity, D, the data pipeline web activity, and E, the Fabric notebook. Now, one of the important parts of this question is that we want to save the raw JSON response in the files area of a bronze lakehouse. So we're not going to be ingesting it directly into a table. We want to save the raw JSON. And these 3 are the only 3 where that's possible. The data flow, we have to output it into a data store, so into a lakehouse table or into a data warehouse table, for example. So we need to perform some sort of transformation on that JSON. We can't just write out the raw file. Same with the event stream. And the other 3 does allow us to do that. So the data pipeline, you can output in various different file formats. And with the Fabric notebook, you can do that as well. Question 3, your goal is to extract a CSV file in Azure Blob Storage and write it to a Fabric data warehouse table. Which of the following methods can you not use to achieve this? Data pipeline copy data activity, B, data flow with a blob storage connector, C, in a Fabric notebook, use the Azure Blob Storage client library for Python, get the file and write the data into the data warehouse table, D, use the copy into statement in t-sql from within your Fabric data warehouse. So the answer here is C. Which of the following methods can you not use to achieve this? So you can't, as we mentioned in the lesson today, you can't use a notebook to write data directly into a Fabric data warehouse. So that was the clue in this question. All of the other 3 methods, so the data pipeline, the data flow, and the copy into statement in a t-sql script, they can be used to ingest data into a Fabric data warehouse table. Question 4, workspace A contains lakehouse A, workspace B contains lakehouse B. You want to create an internal shortcut in lakehouse A pointing to a table in lakehouse B. What's the minimum level of workspace permissions you need to achieve this? A, contributor in workspace A and viewer in workspace B. B, contributor in workspace A and contributor in workspace B. C, member in workspace A and contributor in workspace B. Or D, viewer in workspace A and viewer in workspace B. So the answer here is contributor in workspace A and viewer in workspace B. So when we were talking about the workspace roles permission required to create a new shortcut, well, you need some sort of write permission in the workspace where you're creating the shortcut and read permissions in the lakehouse that you're actually referencing. So the important part of the question here is what's the minimum level of workspace permissions that you need to achieve this? So the others, or B and C at least, would allow you to do this, but it's not the minimum level of permissions that's required. And D, viewer in workspace A. If we're a viewer in workspace A, then you won't have the permissions to create the shortcut in lakehouse A. Number 5. One of your team is a superstar using M code for data extraction. In which of the following data extraction tools can you write M code? Is it A, the Fabric notebook, B, in a t-sql script in the data warehouse, C, in a data flow, or D, in a data pipeline mapping data flow? So the answer here is C, the Dataflow Gen 2. That's the one with the Power Query interface, and you can write In the advanced editor, you can write mquery, obviously not in the Fabric notebook or a t-sql script. And the data pipeline doesn't actually have a mapping data flow activity. So that's a bit of a red herring. That's coming from Azure Data Factory, where that did exist, but not in Fabric. Congratulations, you've completed the first part in section 2 of the study guide, preparing and serving data. In the next lesson, we're going to be looking at the Fabric data warehouse in more detail. And we're going to be looking at how you can schedule all of your ETL workloads, whether that be a Dataflow, a notebook, or a data pipeline. So click here to continue your DP-600 learning journey. I'll see you there.